Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Annie Novotny, Client Services Coordinator for the Women's Resource Center. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is my pleasure to introduce you to today's presenter, a nominated Wonder Woman, Marilyn Thompson, who will be speaking to us about keys to success, performance, image, and exposure. Marilyn will present a model she has used in her human resource career and as a trained executive coach. Marilyn has taught many women how to get what they want and how to be successful in terms of their career. All lines are muted, but feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box below, and Marilyn will try to answer them at the end. Over to you, Marilyn.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. It's exciting to be nominated as a 2020 Wonder Woman, but I like to tell you, all of us are Wonder Women because we all have accomplished amazing things in our lives. Today, what I'm going to do is share a little bit about my background and a model or a tool that I have found to be very, very helpful as I have navigated my career and also helped other women navigate their careers to get more of what they want in their lives. To begin, a little bit about my background. I'm originally from Philadelphia, and I don't know how many of you saw the game this past weekend, but the Eagles won. I have a bachelor's degree in sociology and a master's degree in social work. I actually started my career as a social worker working in working in a nonprofit area. Actually, I'd worked with children and families who had developmental disabilities. Then I made the transition into corporate America, and that's when I started my career in HR. I entered a management development program at General Electric, where I was able to go through a variety of different areas in HR. Eventually, I worked for over 30 some years at GE, GlaxoSmithKline, and at J&J. And throughout those years, I've worked in a variety of HR areas. But what I loved most was working with women and developing their careers. And eventually, I ended up getting a coaching certification in executive coaching. And what I'm going to share with you today is one of the tools that I have found to be very, very helpful. It's a tool that, to be honest with you, I wish I had known about early on in my career because it really helped me when I realized the power of this model, how it can really help one get a better handle on how to navigate one's career. So let me share with you this model. The model is called P.I.E, Performance, Image, and Exposure. And this is a tool that can help you figure out, okay, if I'm going to get what I want in my career, what are the key ingredients? And what's real important to know today is that when you look at corporate America and also when you look at the nonprofit area, a lot of times we'll discover that many women do not advance as fast as they would like to, as much as they want to in their careers. Data from McKinsey shows that 62% of the management level positions are held by men and only 38% are by women. So what is it that as a woman that we can do to make sure that we can get more of what we want in terms of our careers? And a model is P.I.E, Performance, Image, and Exposure. Performance is one, your foundation. When I think about my career in HR, it was around, we used to call it punching tickets, meaning that you wanted to get experience in recruiting, compensation, job evaluation, labor relations. That's your key to getting into the door, your performance. You must make sure that one, you have a real solid base. And also it's important to realize that it's not all about what you do, but it's how you do it. It's your competencies. We've probably all heard stories about an individual who's really great at getting all these reports done and organizing and planning. However, there are so many people that just as soon as that person's name is mentioned, they say, oh my God, I don't want to work with them because they really, really are a driver. And so what you need to look is what do you do at the same, how do you do it in a way in which you are able to demonstrate real caring and passion and people skills at the same time the organizational and planning skills. So it's your competencies, your skills, your knowledge, your mindset that's important, not just what you do. And it's building on these competencies that you are able to take on additional responsibilities. And what's real important in today's environment is to know that the bar in terms of expectations is constantly being raised. Continuous improvement, continuous learning is critical. And I was just reading an article in Fast Magazine, and they were talking about the 6 skills that employees need to have post the pandemic world. Think about this. We're realizing more and more that one, self direction, digital capabilities, communications management, adaptability, motivational skills, those are skills that maybe in the past you might have focused on. However, they're becoming more and more critical. We could all, I'm sure, have examples of how we have learned how to be more adaptable in this environment. So to be successful in your career, you have to be constantly be committed to constant growth and development. Nothing stays the same. So performance is your foundation, but performance is not enough. And I think that was the biggest lesson for me in my career because I thought, wow, if I do a good job, I'm going to advance. I'm going to be able to recognize for my accomplishments and people will see it and I'll get that next job. I'll be able to move on. But it's more than just performance. It's also your image. Image is what you project and how others see you. This includes how you dress, how you talk, and how you present yourself. And today's environment is because many times we're not seeing people in person, it's also how you present yourself virtually. Your image also reflects your mindset and your self-confidence. And it's not all the time people think, oh, it's what I say. It's how you say it and how you say things lots of times reflects what you're thinking. And that's important for us to really get clear in terms of one, what our thoughts are and how these thoughts, if you have negative thoughts, how does that reflect out in terms of how you communicate in an image that you project? And finally, this image piece, to be able to understand what your image is, you need to have feedback from a variety of different sources. You may be thinking that, wow, you're projecting this real professional, savvy, polished image, but others may think differently. And when I say feedback, I mean honest feedback, and I mean feedback from a variety of different sources. We used to call it in the corporate America getting 360-degree feedback. People that are above you, that work alongside you, and also people that may work at a lower level than what you are. You want to get feedback from a variety of different sources and then figure out for yourself, what is it that I can take in and use to advance myself? Now, the next piece of this model is exposure. Exposure is your visibility. It's about your being included. You're being in the room, being at the table, and the conversations are occurred so you can be able to get the information about projects and assignments. Many times people think about exposure as being involved with people on a social basis. It goes beyond just the social piece. And what I always like to tell women is that, a lot of times people will say, as women, we need to toot our horn loud. But you know what? You need to be able to talk about yourself, but others, if they know you and they know about your performance and your image, they know about your reputation, they can talk about you louder. In other words, they can toot your horn a lot louder than yourself. And if you're constantly tooting your horn, you can get that can become a kind of look like you're a bragger. And so you really want to have others out there, and they can be your manager, it could be sponsors, it could be friends, a variety of different people. By working with these individuals to gain you exposure, are able to really advance yourself. I always say to people, it's really great if we can, each one of us, think about ourselves as being a company. And a company, you have your board of directors. Figure out who your board of directors is. Who are those individuals who could be your sponsors and your champions? The final piece I wanted to talk about in terms of this exposure is that you really need to recognize that as you advance in your career, exposure becomes more important. As you move up the ladder, everybody has good performance. They have good experiences behind them. It gets more and more competitive, so exposure becomes more and more critical. But it's important to know that exposure can be good or it can be bad. What happens if you get exposure early on and you don't have the performance behind you? You haven't developed the competencies or the skills, or you haven't really developed a clear sense of who you are and what your image is. From that perspective, exposure can be damaging. So that's why I say it's really very important for you to think about the total pie. And each one of us has an opportunity to reflect and think, okay, with my particular situation and where I am in my career and where I want to go, which piece of this pie do I want to work on? Do I need to work more on my performance, my image, or my exposure? And many times, women in particular, and I'll say my own personal story, is I tended to work a lot of time on my performance, always trying to make sure that I got the education, the training, took on extra job assignments. But I didn't spend as much time working on exposure, the networking piece, getting to know people who might be able to help be an advocate for me. So that was one of my key lessons that I've learned over the years in my career. And also I have found to be very helpful as I've coached in other women. So that's the model: performance, image, exposure. Those are the three pieces of the pie. I like to take a moment now to see if any of you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. I'm going to stop sharing the screen here and let's take a look to see if we have any questions. All right, so the first question is, how did you build your professional community around?
My professional community, you mean the support network that I built for myself? Yes,
Yes.
that's a very, very good question. One, I found that it was real important for me to have a support network within my organization, the company that I worked for. Also, I built a network of people outside of the company. I mentioned my background in terms of social work. I really have always been very committed to social services and nonprofits. I got involved in doing volunteer work at nonprofits, so I developed relationships through that way. I didn't mention this, I did go back to graduate school and got a master's degree in social work. Excuse me, business administration. So I also built a network of people through my business school, and also I developed a strong network of other professionals who were connected with the field that I was working in. So being involved in professional organizations is really important.
Very. That's wonderful. The next question we have is, if I'm looking for a mentor, where would you suggest I begin looking? Very good question.
Very, very good question. And let me just say, I think you should have a couple of mentors, not just one. One, I think a mentor relationship needs to be built on a mutual respect. It also needs to be built on the fact that both people have sort of like a chemistry between them. So, what I have found is a lot of times it helps by getting out, meeting different people. It could be individuals in your job environment, it could be people in your community. Find someone who you admire. And based on that, maybe have lunch with them, or I hate to say it, have a Zoom meeting with them, and begin to develop some connections. and over time discover whether or not it develops into a mentoring relationship. A lot of times people will say, okay, let me go meet somebody, say, oh, I want you to be my mentor. I really encourage you to get to know the person and make sure that there's a mutual interest in developing that mentoring relationship. That was
Wonderful.
a very good question. Yeah.
Yes. I have another question here. Now that many of us are working remotely, how would you suggest connecting with others in your community?
Well, I know that many of us are working remotely, and obviously Zoom is a great vehicle. Another thing is there, you can practice social distancing, and there is an opportunity. I know, I will give you an example. Yesterday, I actually did some volunteer work at All Face Food Bank and was able to meet some other volunteers and some people at All Face. And that was a great way to connect. So there are some volunteer opportunities, and a number of the nonprofits in our area have put in place really good social distancing mask requirements that makes it so that the environment is safe, that you can do some volunteer work. So there is a possibility of doing some work in person at the same time. You have to decide what you feel safe and comfortable with. Zoom is also a great vehicle.
Exactly. I have one question here, very good one. If I'm interested in taking on more responsibility at work, how would you suggest I approach this topic with my manager?
One thing to do is to find out what is it that you think you would like to take on, because you want to be able to have a conversation with your manager around, well, I see there's certain needs in the organization, and also to think about your competencies, your skills, your knowledge that you could bring to the table that would be of help. So I really encourage you to do some reflection around that. And you can also ask your manager for ideas or thoughts and say, is there any particular need that you see that the organization or the nonprofit has that might be able to, I might be able to contribute to and benefit from. So do your self reflection and also get some suggestions from your manager or from others. There may be some others in your organization that could give you some ideas.
Perfect. We have a question from Angelica. Thank you so much for your question. How do you tell someone nicely that her image is bad?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, first, let me say, what is your reason for doing this? If your reason is one, you really care about the person, you want the person to be more successful in what they do, I think that's good. So, really make sure that you have a really good rationale for wanting to tell this individual the feedback. Because if the individual understands that you're being sincere and you're there to help them, it makes giving this kind of feedback a lot more easier. So one, make sure your intentions are good, and then look at an opportunity where you might be able to have this type of conversation. And I do believe that you need to think about making sure you create a safe space so that you can have this conversation. Last thing you want to do is text them a message and say, hey, you know what, you got a really bad image. And also, you need to be really clear when you say their image is not good. Okay, what does that look like? What is it they do? What is it they say? What is it about their body language? Be as specific as possible. That is really critical for any kind of feedback.
Wonderful. What is the biggest tip you would give for success? You know, with all of the years that you have curated your career, what is the biggest tip that you can think would help somebody along their way?
Oh, wow. That's really a good question. Actually, on my slide, I had a quote from Maya Angelou, who's one of my favorite writers. And she said, success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. one of the biggest tips I really have is that, you know what, you really, really need to make sure you know what you like to do and you figure that out and you do it. That passion really makes a big difference. And there's lots of things that many of us can do, but if you don't have a genuine passion around it and really enjoy it, it's going to wear you down eventually.
Exactly. So wise. Thank you so much, Marilyn, for such a wonderful presentation. It is not so much about what you do, but how you do it. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you in our future workshops or webinars. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, Marilyn.
Thank you very much. Good evening.